All right. Well, welcome to Roots of Reality Experiences. Today I'm joined by Steve Everett, who is a pop and roll singer and songwriter. As a musician, Steve has toured all across the United States performing his music, which has been nominated for various awards and is prominently featured in the video game franchise NASCAR Heat. So, Steve, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, brother.
So, how did you first get interested in music?
My dad, I grew up in North Carolina, and I was lucky enough to have, a father who grew up in a really rural area in North
Okay.
Carolina and kind of got out and went and sang opera. And so in the late 60s and early 70s, he kind of, was in the highest circles there are, singing opera in New York
Wow.
and San Francisco. And and it's a really cutthroat environment, and you can imagine classical music, like there's just not that many opportunities. So he
Yeah.
he became a church choir director in order to still be able to do classical music and teach voice lessons and stuff. And so I grew up with him, in that role. And so from a very early age, I was, just any questions I had about music, he could answer. So it was just a great resource, and I was in everything. He worked at like every kind of church there was, every denomination.
Jeez.
So I just got a lot of different music, and it was just kind of a no brainer.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. So there's a history of talent then in your family. Now, did your dad perform like on Broadway or something in New York City, or
No, it was more like the type of thing you see at the Met. He
oh, at the Met? Okay, yeah. So
yeah,
he
he was
performed at the Met.
yeah, he was a really successful opera singer for a second.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's actually ironic. My grandmother performed at the Met and was an opera singer for a little while. Um,
Okay.
but she would eventually like blow her voice out, so it basically ended her career. But yeah, I did not inherit her talent though, so so
That's
it's not.
okay.
It's a little bit harder when it's coming from a grandparent, I guess, versus a parent. But
You definitely have to nurture it, and it's funny. I mean, my brother has some musical talent, but
yeah,
he's never, really made it his focus for very long. And so, I'm sure. Who knows how he looks at my brother or my dad and myself? I'm sure,
yeah,
'cause he thinks like, well, that's inside me too. I just, you
gotta
have to
find it.
choose it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think like another grandparent of mine was tone deaf, so it's kind of a weird mix. So we all kind of get mixed up in terms of musical talent, I guess, in my family. But uh, yeah, that's impressive. Okay, and so like, what would you say then were your musical influences growing up besides your dad, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of people in the South. I grew up in a very conservative,
Hmm.
religious household.
Yeah,
And so the only exceptions that were made for us were oldies, and so it was like either listen to Southern gospel or oldies, and so all we listened to was oldies.
yeah,
And so like Simon and Garfunkel stuff that's like still wholesome, I guess, enough.
right.
But yeah, just like all those melodies from um, the Beatles and like even the Motown stuff early on. Simon and Garfunkel was huge.
Yeah,
Just and anything that from that era, and it all had such tight harmonies and really just positive, fun songs. They were short songs in those eras, and I think that definitely shaped what I do now, because I definitely try to have more of an upbeat tone and just kind of
sure.
a spoonful of sugar to go make the medicine go down, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I guess one of the interesting things about like, we were talking about like songs from the 60s or 70s is just how it's pretty amazing how songs can be timeless and they can still be relevant, used often in films or TV shows. It's kind of an amazing aspect, I guess, of music is that they can doesn't matter when it was written or made, but people can still enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think it can be from really any style of music, which is weird because you think of certain
Yes.
things like bell bottoms came and went, and most people were like, "Thank God the bell bottoms are gone," but now they're back, and it's like it's not weird or ironic. There's certain people that you're just like, yeah, this style of music or this personality type, it looks good in bell bottoms, and I think it's kind of like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. It's interesting to see how things come and go over time and come back later. And so when you began your journey, like when did you feel like you want to be a professional musician?
Yeah, it's really early is the answer, you know,
Okay.
a-
So,
and honestly, I kind of think that the jobs that pay the worst are the ones that you know the earliest on that you want to do. Like, how many teachers are just like, I knew I was going to be a teacher my whole life, you know?
yeah.
It's like these jobs that are callings tend to be under, rewarded. And so, I mean, I was like, I have this sticker. I made all my merch try to be like positive. So it says Steve Everett believes in me. So you're wearing a shirt that says I believe in you instead of it, like promoting me. And I have
Yeah,
this
that's cool.
sticker.
Okay.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
there's always something you can do. But there's this sticker that's a picture of me when I was like 3 years old, and there's a Fisher Price vacuum, and I would rip the bass off, and it kind of looked like a guitar, and I would hold it and like sit on the mantle in a rocking chair and just like make noise, and like take my shirt off and stuff, like just trying to be a rock star from the very beginning. So I think everybody in the family was kind of like, seems like he's going this way. And then I remember being in this like this concert hall and watching this a choir of adults, and I was like 10 years old or something, and I just remember being moved emotionally by these people singing on stage, and
Sure.
everybody in the hall was focused on them, and it was so serious. And I just thought it was so cool, like all these adults who never play, and they don't, like adults, when you're a kid, it doesn't seem like they do anything for fun, but it was like they took time out of their day to come sit here and be just quiet and listen so that they can be moved emotionally. And I
Yeah.
was just like, something about this is like magical. This is like non-religious church.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, there is just this like unbelievable human experience that people have when they listen to music, no matter where you are, what culture you're from, or your religion. Just because pretty much everyone enjoys music, so it's this kind of universal language, I guess. But that's interesting. So, like, were your parents supportive of your ambitions to become a musician then, or were they like, well, you want to think twice about this, or?
Yeah, I think my dad was very aware that it was just going to be different for me than it was for him, because for him to sing that opera stuff, and that I studied that in college,
Yeah.
and had to learn a lot of the same arias and pieces that he learned, and they are just like, you need to have 95% of what you're capable of to be able to pull them off. And like, the average person just doesn't walk around at 95% capacity in anything all the
Yeah.
time. And so for him, it just, he met my mom, and it's just, it's tough to never get sick and to just always be able to hit those high notes. And so for me, he was excited that I was writing my own songs and booking my own shows and just kind of building my own business. And so I think for him, it was like, if you can find a way that you can make the music that you want to make, and you can be in charge of how often you do it, like that seems like a no-brainer. So it was just kind of the trick of getting my mom, who's been married to a musician for most of her life, you know, to be like, oh, you're gonna do this too, huh? All right, well,
Yeah, yeah. I guess it takes a little bit of convincing with something like that.
yeah. But now she's like super supportive and thinks I'm the
Yeah,
best songwriter on the planet.
that's good. So you converted her eventually. So
Yeah, if anything, I did too good of a job.
okay. So, like, how difficult is it then to get started as a musician? Because obviously, I think when people think of musicians that have even had some moderate success, just performing at a concert, they assume like, okay, this person must be making bank at this point. They're doing really well. But what's the reality of that situation?
Oh, I mean, it's bleak. It's bleak, but honestly, it's just I kind of describe the music industry as this, multi-lane interstate with a wall built around it, and there's no on-ramp. And so basically, like, if you want to kind of merge in, you just have to find a way to get up to speed, and then look for a crack in the wall that you can like Kool-Aid man through. It's just it's like if you decided you want to be a plumber, and then um you made that choice, and it was a huge choice to you, and you're like, I'm gonna do it, and then you were like, all right, who can teach me how to be a plumber? And there's no way. It's just a bunch of different opinions and no one knows what's going on. And you're like, wait, how am I going to learn how to be a plumber if no one will show me? And there's not like nobody's in charge, you know? And so
Yeah.
that's what it feels like. It feels like you're just, um, like every room you walk into and you think like, oh, the music industry is in here, and then you open the door, there's nothing in there, and it just feels like you're chasing a ghost. And but somewhere along the line, if you're diligent and you work hard and you write a lot of songs and you know, just kind of find a way to make records and position yourself um, in places where you might want to fit in or play music at some point, you know, you just kind of it's something that you have to do, is the only way that it can work, because you just have to scratch away and claw and find these little things, and you get one thing, and then it's like, oh well, I created this one thing, like I manifested this.
Yeah.
Now, you know, how do I get another thing? And it just kind of like 10 years go by and you've got enough of those little things, and then people come up to you and they're like, hey man, how do you do it? And you're just like, I still can't tell you, I have no idea, this is just, it's the
Just
Wild
random.
West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get that's one of the, I guess, the troublesome aspects of the music industry and other, I guess, entertainment industries in general, because it's, you know, when people are judging lots and lots of very talented people, it's subjective to a certain extent, where it's just like there's lots of talented people that will never be discovered at all just because, you know, it just never happened for whatever reason. And I mean, I guess in general, life is kind of that way with when you're trying to pursue anything, you know, it's kind of part of it's just being in the right place at the right time, or there's a lot of factors at play. So you just kind of keep plowing ahead, I guess, and until you get there, there's whatever path you have to take.
Yeah, and kind of a good way to think about it is like it's like you have to go to college. You know, you have to get your doctorate
Yeah.
in being a touring musician, but instead of you getting a doctorate at a school around a
Yeah.
bunch of other people who are also like given the freedom to mess up and being instructed all along the way, and told like this is what it'll be like once you're done learning. You know, it's basically like the college you go to is just go out there and screw it up a whole bunch publicly.
Yeah.
And you know, and somebody's like, hey, you got to tweet now, like you're a person that has to tweet if you want to do this. And then you're like, okay, cool, well, hopefully my opinions aren't garbage and I'm going to get destroyed, you know.
Right. That's right.
And you're
Yep. It's
21, you know, and
yeah.
it's people expect you to have something to say. And so it's just kind of the age at which you have to make the choice to do this for a living is a age where you really don't have anything worthwhile to say to anyone who's older than you know. So
Yeah.
you really have to just like live for 10 years or so until you can really have an audience that, you know, kind of respects that you're going to give them some truth, or you know, reframe something they've been through in a way that'll be
Sure.
beneficial for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That's interesting journey, because I guess yeah, there is a disadvantage the later that you start in the music world. Probably harder it is to break in.
Yeah, I mean, I think though that the people who start a little later, they take it a little more seriously, and I think it's a lot easier to learn how to play music and learn how to entertain people than it is to have something to say. So, you know, when somebody's lived for 30 or 40 years, they're going to have, you know, a lot of life experiences. They're going to have something to say, and that is the much harder thing to find
Yeah.
than is musical talent, I think.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So one thing I noticed about your background is that you describe yourself as a pop and roll singer and songwriter. What exactly is pop and roll? Because I'm not too. I mean, I've heard of pop and I've heard of rock and roll, but like, what exactly is that genre?
Yeah, I made it up. I trademarked
Yeah.
it. I got tired of telling people that it sounded like friendly Tom Petty. So I just kind of, because you know, I was born in Georgia and grew up in North Carolina. Like,
Yeah.
I don't make country music if you live in the South, but everywhere else I go, people are like, oh, you're country. You know, so you can't fight
Yeah.
it. You know, like you can't give
Yeah.
yourself your own nickname. It's kind of that kind of thing.
Well,
Uh,
that's an interesting aspect, I think, for sure, because it seems to me like, I mean, a lot of it just I guess based on your accent and what part of the country you're from, where they automatically assume like, oh, if I can hear your accent in a song, you must be a country singer. You know,
right. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is that kind of stereotype, and I guess country music to a certain extent, there are country musicians who kind of blend that rock and country mix, where it's kind of just like rock music with a country accent. Um, And so
Right.
I could see where like some people would be just assume that you're country because of that. But
Yeah, and I don't really care, like honestly, the longer I'm a musician, the less I can even talk about it intelligently when somebody's like, "Oh, what, who do you think you sound like?" And I'm like, I have no idea. Like we're so bad at that for ourselves.
yeah,
Like I can tell you which one of my friends sounds like which famous artist, but
sure.
it's impossible to listen to yourself and not just, be completely lost in a million other things.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, I mean, I don't like the first time I heard your music, I don't think I could like peg like, oh, okay, he sounds like this guy or something.
Cool.
So to me, I guess the pop and roll thing works because you don't sound like anyone I've heard, and so I guess you're pop and roll. So
Yeah, well, and that's good. And honestly, like that's what I tell. I'm 37, and so it's odd, but there's tons of young artists that ask me questions, and I always feel like, I can't be the older guy that like I was just 19 years old. It's just so weird.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I tell people. I totally lost my train of thought. I
no,
started
that's
thinking
right.
about this kid asking me the other day about. He was like, "Hey, do you know about insurance?" That's the kind of old man questions I'm getting now. People are like, "Hey, you seem like you would probably be able to tell me about a liability policy."
Yeah, can you do my taxes?
Yeah. And
Oh
at the
my
same
god.
time, like I still feel like a baby. Like I'm just getting started, and I could, go for so much longer. But
Oh sure, yeah.
just the different phases, and it's just a wild way to make a living.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the age for a musician also has kind of expanded over time. So it's kind of a field that you can do longer and longer, I guess, probably due to a certain extent with like modern medicine and people are just living longer and they're healthier longer. So, these just musicians that are like, performing in their 80s even, and it's just crazy. So
Yeah, and that is kind of the cool thing. When you're young, there's a avenue that you can go down. If you're
yeah,
young and attractive, and if you make a style of music that is what's currently selling, then you can have a lot of success. But if you kind of don't fit in that genre of what's going on currently, then you kind of miss that window. But there's other windows later on. Kind of what I
sure.
was talking about. Once you have something to say, once you've been alive long enough to kind of have put some things together and make some connections, all of a sudden there's like the music industry that exists for adults, and like singer songwriter nights and an evening with Steve Everett type of
Yeah,
shows,
yeah.
and you get there's people from ages like 30 to 70 at a little club that holds 125 people, and it's just like, to me, I'm glad I didn't get what I want, because arena shows are like my least favorite things on the planet, and I would just feel like I was missing so much if I couldn't play these little writers nights all over America and get to like actually physically meet everybody that comes afterwards.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it is a different lifestyle if have this very personal connection with your audience, being able to talk to them after show versus just like, okay, bye. And you're never interacting with any of them because they're just a bunch of dots in the stands kind of. So
Yeah. Well, and I think, as a music fan myself, there's stuff that I connect to because I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And that makes me feel, like I'm listening to that in my house, and it like gets me dancing or something, and
yeah.
it's like hip music. And then there's stuff that like, I always tell the story that, Ryan Adams is problematic now. He's been through some scandals. But
Hmm.
before that happened, Taylor Swift made this huge record, 1989, and it was her like pop crossover record. And then Ryan Adams made a cover of that whole record, like did that whole record in his style. And Ryan Adams has always been far less famous, just kind of more famous to musicians. Like he's a
Yes. Yeah.
songwriter for songwriters, and Taylor Swift is obviously just like the biggest thing going. And so, but it was just interesting. One day, Taylor Swift posts to her like 200 million Instagram followers, and she's excited, so excited, because Ryan Adams has like covered her whole record, and she's like, "This is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me." But like, you go to Ryan Adams's page, and he's got like 60,000 Instagram followers. But she's super excited about
Yeah.
him doing it, but her audience is like, who is this guy? You know what I mean? So it's just kind
Yeah.
of like the whole thing is just smoke and mirrors, and the priorities are just, they're completely upside down. So it's like the stuff that is the quietest, successful is usually, the best, and it reaches the least amount of people. It's just it really, the music industry rewards you for digging in deeper and going to find the people who aren't having the big commercial success.
I mean, that is like a really, really interesting point, because then you just think about like all the people who don't write their own music, and they're super, super famous just because they're the person with the voice. But the writing aspect is the reason why the music even works in the first place, because you're writing for that voice. And there's lots of great voices out there, but writers, that's a tough skill. You know, so that's
And that's
interesting.
what made my dad excited for me, was just like, oh, you write the music and then you perform the music that you wrote. Like,
Yeah,
so if you run into trouble, vocally one night, I'm just like, all right, well, I'll pick the songs that are, not as taxing vocally, or I'll tell some more
yeah.
stories. It's just way more easy to kind of like figure a way through that's still entertaining, that nobody feels like they missed out on what they signed up for.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it also just like makes you. I mean, I guess you can feel personally also that like your work means a lot more because it's something that you wrote. You're not just taking someone else's work and then just turning into a song. But it's like this is stuff that you wrote. I suppose that also can make it like mean so much more to an audience, and of course you who's performing it. So
Yeah, and I think it's, you can go on Amazon and you can get a shower curtain, but you can also go to the local farmer's market, and there's some person who's made like an artisan shower curtain
yeah,
out of
yeah,
sustainable materials, and it's going to be way more. And they can't only make a few per year, but
yeah,
you can have that, and there's people who really value that. And if you once you make a connection like that, it's there forever. Whereas like there's people who went to like a Yaz concert in 1989 who never saw Yaz ever again, but they had a hit song, and it was like, we're going to go see him play that one song. But there wasn't a connection.
yeah.
And that's just kind of the difference between like the pop culture versus the, the more emotional connection, the songwriter connection. And, just typically we reach for the songwriters when we're going through breakups, or when somebody in our family, passes away. And
Sure.
then when we're floating high, when we're on the lake, we listen to top 40.
It's, the top 40 that always seems to change constantly. And but yeah, it's true. The songs that have meaning to people, that are not just just some background noise entertainment songs, typically, I think will stand the test of time because people actually make people think. I guess you can almost think of it like the same thing with comedies. Unless the film is unbelievably funny, that gives you this super memorable experience. A lot of comedies are kind of just, okay, you'll watch it, it's funny, and then you'll forget it. So it's interesting to see how that works, and what connects with people. But I suppose what's another thing that's really interesting to me about your music, I've always wondered about this, so it's cool to talk to someone who's had a lot of experience with this. But so how did you get connected with NASCAR Heat, the video game series?
Yeah. Honestly, it's so funny. You try a million things, you send a million emails and cold calls, and everything that you think you're chasing after. It's never that stuff that you get. It's always just some random person that you met in like an elevator one time, who's like, oh yeah, my buddy Steve that I met plays music. I'll just see if he's got anything that'll work. And it's just always something like that. And so I just got the call one day that was from a friend in North Carolina, which happens to be where NASCAR's based.
Yeah.
And she just was one of the people as a music supervisor for one of the games. And I guess they had decided to use independent artists to save a little money. And so she asked me if I had anything that would meet the criteria. So I sent her over a couple things, and they put one of my songs in NASCAR Heat 2. And I didn't know, I'm not a huge video game person, so I wasn't sure like what that would look like in terms of how many people play it. But as soon as it came out, my YouTube just started blowing up from people from all over the world, just being like, "Hey, NASCAR rules! This song rules! Cheers!" And it was like you hear these horror stories about the internet, but everybody's just been so nice and like, hey, sorry you're not famous. And I'm like, it's cool, man. All good. Just glad you
Sorry,
like
you're
this
not
song.
famous.
Yeah. Everybody
That's
wants the
hilarious.
stuff that they like to be, universally liked, so they don't have to feel weird about it, I guess.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so it really was just, I guess, kind of random coincidence that you got involved with that.
Well, and what happened is like, every once in a while, the right thing hits the right place at the right time. And so I guess my music, for whatever reason, they did these like focus groups and people were like, yeah, this is awesome for this game. And so the next game, they were like, can we get a couple more songs? And then another one happened. And then there's been these 3 other racing games that have happened. And so I don't know, something about my music just, you want to drive in a circle. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. It's the NASCAR theme song now. Yeah, I mean that's hilarious. Because I mean I've talked. I think I played a lot of video games like my brother growing up, and we would talk about all the time about songs that we get stuck in our heads from playing a game, and it's just we always thought that if you were to get a song on a video game, it'd be the best advertising because it just plays again and
Oh
again
yeah.
and again until you like the song. It will be playing, and so yeah, I mean it's just a fantastic way to advertise. Um,
Yeah, and what's great is that, if for video games, most of us grow up, with not a ton of money, and so like you get
yeah,
a game, but you keep that one game for years,
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and like, you get like NASCAR Heat 2 and you don't buy NASCAR Heat 3, you're not a
that's right.
Rockefeller, for God's sake.
Yeah, I mean that's another factor. Is just I mean these games can last for years,
Yeah.
and people won't upgrade for whatever reason. So yeah, yeah, but yeah, I guess that worked out for you then. So
Yeah, it's been great.
that's cool. Okay. So now I see that you also like post your lyrics of songs on your website. Is that something that musicians commonly do? Because I don't think I've seen that very often. But I thought that was an interesting thing that you do.
Yeah, I think for whatever reason, I'm like I believe there's a talent hard work axis,
Yeah.
and I think musicians, the musicians. I live in Nashville, so there's just so many incredible artists
Sure.
around me at
Sure.
all times, and it seems like the ones that are the most talented have the most trouble with the business aspect and like the just office work that you have to do to kind of keep up with everything and
Yeah.
doing like merch inventory and booking and all that stuff, when you're indie that you have to do. And I just kind of feel like I'm just right there in the middle of the talent hard work axis. So, stuff like that, will come to me. Like I'm constantly thinking about how, if you find my music and you like it, what are the things that you would want? Like, how can I make your experience better and make you,
Yeah.
feel appreciated, or give you, just make sure that if there's something you want to know about what I'm doing, that you can find the answer. And so I don't know if other musicians do it. My guess is no, because I definitely, a few years ago decided to stop trying to be cool and like pretend that I'm, Bruce Springsteen or something, So I'm just like, my website is very like, hey, what's up? I'm Steve. I'm not famous, but thanks for being here.
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of a cool touch because it's yeah, I mean, just gives extra access to people who are curious about your music. I think also Joe gives like a good example of just like the process of a song and seeing the lines and seeing how it's formatted. Because I think a lot of people don't pay attention to that, but if they were to go on your website and look up what you're doing, they would see that maybe for the first time, like actually paying attention to it and seeing how songs are formed. It's kind of a interesting thing. So
Yeah, I mean, well, and there's just without putting it on your website, there's no real modern liner note,
yeah,
and I think that Spotify, Apple Music, like the big ones in the room, they should have, because it would be very easy for us to just upload our virtual album art,
sure,
so that when you're listening, you can thumb through and see who played on each song and who produced it and what the words are and like
yeah,
everything that we grew up, devouring about our favorite artists. And it's
yeah,
just, to me, it's like there's all these are chances for me to be creative and for me to, try to inspire or agitate or whatever my goal is, like the more opportunity there's for me to express myself and try to, make a point that's going to be helpful to someone, the better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's that makes total sense. Um, now, how hard is it to tell when you're writing a song? Like, how hard is it to predict whether that song will be successful or not for a musician?
Uh, Pretty hard, honestly.
Yeah.
Every record I've ever made, when I went into the studio, I was like, "Oh, this is the one." And then we recorded all the songs, and then I'll be like, "Oh, that's kind of the weakest one." And I forgot that this other one would actually, take on this new life, and it's so tough. But honestly, I remembered your question from earlier about the pop and roll thing.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I just, the and I forgot it again immediately. I'm just not supposed to talk about the pop and roll thing.
That's right. We'll keep that a secret. I mean, that's your thing. So we don't want to spread too much. And then people will be like, "Oh, I also pop and roll," and then you got a problem. So it's
I'm proud of myself for bringing it back up and then forgetting it again. It's like
yeah.
it's
we'll
almost impressive.
we'll come back to it maybe. It's
Never bring it up again, please.
But I mean, I was thinking like with the song "Long Year," for example, did you think that would be like one of your more popular songs, or was it just kind of like, oh, this is interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of all the songs you write, if you separate them, like if you had to pick the best half of the songs you've ever written, it's pretty easy to do that. And
Yeah.
then, with a song like Long Year, it's got an alternative, really strong chord progression, that's unlike a lot of the stuff that I've made. And so I knew it would stand out, which is, it kind of already sets it up for success. So
Yeah.
there's little things like that. If it's just kind of a little different than what you normally do, but
Sure.
um, yeah, something like that one. That's a song. Anything that comes out really quickly, you always know like that's probably going to be really easy to consume because it was really easy to create.
Okay. Yeah.
And the stuff that you have to really chop away at, you have to kind of like, you get an idea and you're like, man, I'm going to have to learn and grow as a human to even like do this idea justice. And so sometimes, it takes months and you have to literally make yourself better to live up to the idea of the song. And then sometimes it's just like, it just falls out of your head and it's just, and it feels way different. And when it happens like that, you definitely realize like, it just feels like we're all connected, and like these ideas are
Yeah.
kind of flying around. And if you're in the mind space of looking for them, then, you can be diligent and capitalize. And if not, it kind of goes to the next person, it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard other musicians talk about that before too, where it's just like, sometimes it's a song that you can write in like 10 minutes or something, and then that turns out to be a big hit. It's interesting that how that works even. How does it happen where you can just have a song right in 10 minutes and be way better than, the other songs in terms of popularity that you worked hours or days or months on?
Yeah, and I think it's just kind of one of those things where like, if you went to the gym and, you were working out and you lifted really lightweight, that would be really easy to do, but you'd
Yeah.
be bored with it. You lift medium weight and you can keep your form and it's like taxing, but it feels good. And then you can try to lift like super heavy weight and it's like the most you can possibly do. And that's when it's like, you never know how it's going to go and your form suffers. And,
Yeah.
so I think you just kind of, some of the songs are the light lifts and you kind of discard them. And then some of them are right there in your wheelhouse, and they're just really comfortable. And then some of the songs are kind of stretching you. And so it just kind of makes sense that the ones that are stretching you are for you, to kind of broaden your wheelhouse. But people really only interact with the ones that are in your wheelhouse because it's just, for whatever reason, they can tell that it's comfortable for you. And it's not,
Yeah.
you're not having to think about it very much. And that comes across. People can just tell when you've really internalized a song, and it really is. And I think that's what it means to find your voice as an artist, is to find that wheelhouse and have everybody kind of recognize like, oh yeah, this is a unique thing. And that's the pop and roll thing that I realized that I was only,
There we go.
the only worth that I had was exactly me, not me trying to sound like someone else, but literally like I owe it to myself to be as unique sonically as I possibly can.
Yeah.
just because that's the only what else could set me apart besides just being myself, you know?
Yeah. Is there then like a lot of pressure just in general in the music across the music industry, no matter the genre, to just try to mimic other people and what made them successful then?
Yes, certainly. Just because, and I think it's as attention spans, get shorter.
Yeah.
You just don't get very much time, and so, and we see this a lot. A new actor will come along, like Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah.
Was in quite a few movies and quite a few independent movies and did a really great job. And those people who pay attention to indie movies and short films and are really on the bleeding edge of film, which I really love film, and so I try to be really attentive as much as I can. We saw that coming a mile away, but it kind of takes some time for people to get on that train and realize like, oh, well, it's worth my attention to check out a Timothy Chalamet film because so many other people have told me it is. We just have so many options that you kind of have to have a reason to listen to something because like, why, people are like, I'm busy. Like, I don't need to find a new thing that I have to care about,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so much out there for people to consume. It's a hyper competitive environment, I guess. So a lot of pressure. Yeah.
Well, but the pressure is off in the sense that like, once you get good, once you're like, okay, well, somebody could not like this, but I'm doing this thing well, like I am making the style of music that I want to make and I'm doing it at a high level. So now it's just like do you want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? If you hate peanut butter and jellies, you probably don't want one, and that's fine. It doesn't mean it's a bad sandwich,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I guess just about finding your comfort zone and doing what works, and you can't please everyone. So
yeah, but you try until you realize you can't, and so for some of us that takes a long time, and I'm still struggling with that, but I'm doing better.
Yeah. What would you say then is like the sort of the biggest misconceptions for music and songwriting? What are people often thinking that really isn't very accurate?
Just that the ability to get on stage, or even the desire to get on stage and enjoying that and being the center of attention. Just, I feel like most people think that we all like that off the stage as well. It just seems like most of my friends that make music, we're all pretty introverted when we're allowed to be, And so I know for myself, I go on these long walks every day, just me. And I really need to, I can kind of only create, by myself when I have time to be silent and really think. And so, but people, you announce a tour and then, just people start hitting you up and they're like, oh, we got to go to lunch before your show and dinner after, we, take you out drinking. And they, everywhere you go, they want it to be this huge party, And it's just like, I understand that that's what we're doing on stage, but it's just, it takes so much out of you to do it on stage that you just, it has to live there and not follow you around, but it takes you your whole like first 10 years of doing it because you're just so excited that people are coming to see you and they want to hang out with you,
Yeah, I'm sure that's an adjustment. Because it is tough. You spend so much energy doing a performance. And if you don't, I mean, I guess some people have the personality where they can just go all the time and, be super energetic, but I guess that's probably pretty rare to be that, to be able to do that all the time for years and years and years. So
yeah. And you just have to be wired for that. But all of my friends that are in the industry that have success that are like that, they have someone with them who can help, like, keep their feet on the ground and keep them on task, because to have that personality, a lot of times I'll go on these runs doing singer-songwriter shows because I'll do full band shows sometimes. But when it's just me and the guitar in the car, I'm just alone with my thoughts and, I'm in charge of everything. And a lot of those people who are just more like, have to be around other people and those artists that we all love that are just like huge personalities. We hear the stories, we see the documentaries about the fallout for everybody around them. It's impossible to maintain that kind of energy over a long period of time and not have these just crushing lows and massive highs. And it gets so messy. And so I think there's a lot
Yeah.
of us that, have just tried to seek out a more steady, just like for me, the work is the reward. Like I love writing songs. I love traveling around and, finding little restaurants and cool little towns in the middle of nowhere. And, and just not knowing who's coming to the show and playing and just having to entertain who comes. And maybe they've heard of you, maybe they haven't. And sometimes you're opening up for a huge artist and you get an opportunity to try to turn some of their fans into your fans. And sometimes you're playing somebody's backyard for 30 people, and it's just kind of,
Yeah.
you just have to find a place where the music is the reward, it's enough. And then it seems like once you get to that place, then some little successes find you here and there, and everybody kind of, I don't know, it's like Jason Bateman, the actor, talks about sexy indifference. Once you get that sexy indifference towards all the commercial success and fame, all of a sudden the industry's like, well, how come you don't call us anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that low key kind of lifestyle, especially the entertainment industry, can be a lot more stable for people in it, where you don't, you're not so bipolar about everything in your life. Because I guess it can get pretty crazy, as you pointed out.
Yeah, well, and like, I just don't think people we're not wired to have the best night every night.
Right. Yeah.
It is just awful. So like you do that for a few weeks and then you come home and you're like, God, why is everybody so boring? And you're like, no, they're not boring. You're just, you have been blown wide open. Like you're a raw nerve now, man. You got to calm down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Can't win them all. So
yeah. Like, and at some point you do have to sleep a little bit.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's an important thing for sure. So what are you currently working on then?
I made a record called Little Wins, which was my fourth full length in
that's right.
Yeah, in 2020 and 2021. And we had to reschedule it a bunch because of the pandemic, and just kind of I crowdfund my record. So I used this company called Indiegogo, and I posted the link to raise about $30,000 to make a record. And within, I don't know, 2 days of posting the link, the COVID thing happened, and it was just like,
oh my gosh,
Steve's raising money in the middle of a international pandemic. And so I felt so guilty about being like, okay, well, make sure you feed your kids, but let's make sure this record gets made.
Yeah, that's bad timing. Yeah.
Yeah, but so but we pushed through, and I hired a friend of mine, Paul Fow, who's a great artist as well. And he's gotten into filmmaking, and so I just thought I had gone through so much in 2020, and started going to therapy and keeping a gratitude journal, and I just completely I just bottomed out going into 2020, and the pandemic saved me. Like, it gave me time to just think and stop and kind of like what we were just talking about overextending yourself. And I just had to kind of like have an excuse not to take every show that was offered to me. So I was just in Nashville at my house for a year, and it was so good for me to just, really just chip away at some battles that I just hadn't had any time,
Yeah.
Felt like I took a deep breath after college, and then, had finally run out of oxygen for the first time as an adult, And so I just figured it was an important moment. And so I hired my buddy Paul, and we rented some really cool camera gear and a drone, and we made a documentary about making the record, and just it's what it looks like to make an independent record with some of the most decorated Nashville session players. So it's really really legitimate in that way, but also I'm the least successful artist they play with every time they play with me, which is kind of a neat dynamic, and it plays out well on screen. And so I just finished the voiceover, but it turned into this 30-minute short film that we're about to enter into all the film festivals, and it'll be called Little Wins. And
that's cool.
I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
It really, there's not that many, we all love music documentaries, but there so many of them, as an artist, like for me to watch the like Bon Jovi, behind the music thing, it's like, well, I'm not going to walk into a a radio station and hand them my demo and get a deal the next day. Like that
Yeah.
doesn't help
Yeah.
me. But I think having some representation for the independent artist that's like, hey, this guy's not rich. He does this because he loves it. And he's, got a fan base and he services that fan base. And like they help each other out. And I just think it's good to have that shown on screen. So we'll see if it gets anywhere, but I'm just excited to have made it.
Yeah. I mean, that's an important aspect of these. A lot of people just don't, I think there's, for me, people who are especially not paying close attention to what happens in the music industry they don't really understand the difference of like, oh, are you part of, an actual label, or are you independent? And that's really cool that you can give people a taste of what that's like, and help people sort of understand like, hey, not all musicians are, selling out, all these different stadiums across the country. So
Yeah, and there's a middle class for musicians, for artists,
yeah,
for singer-songwriters. There is a middle class. You just have to be willing to, everybody wants to have a booking agent, everybody wants to have a record label. And so there's just so many people that they take these deals where they're bad deals for the record label and they're bad deals for the artist, and nothing ever comes of them. And I have so many friends who have signed major record deals, but most of the people on every record label aren't doing well, and they get dropped after one record. It's just like, even if you make it, quote unquote, it looks the same for everyone. That what I was saying earlier about every room you go into, there's just, another note that's like, the music industry has moved. Come find us, there's really, it's just tastes, and tastes change. And I think really the only thing you can do is just make exactly the kind of music you want, and then just keep doing it. And eventually taste will probably come around, and if you're trying to chase taste, then you'll always be off. Whereas, if you just kind of stay where you are, then everything comes back to you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you just also have, being independent, you just have so much more control over everything, and of your life, really, I guess. So
Yeah, which can be, terrible, because I think every artist is, you're good for a couple weeks and then you're
sure,
kind
sure.
of, and it's not real healthy to be your own product. It's really
Yeah.
hard to learn how to hear no to Steve the artist and not take that as like no to Steve the dude.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess there's good aspects and bad aspects, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but I mean, everybody's got
sure.
their things. It always, there's all these little weird picadillos about being like a public person, but
Yeah.
not being like a widely, famous public person.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the people who, like, your local weather person.
Yeah.
Like everybody in your town knows who they are, but like
Yeah.
they're not Dan Rather.
Yeah. That's right. That's true. I mean, I feel like for a lot of people, that's probably also the healthier balance too. Because if you're super famous, your life becomes, basically dictated by other people so much, because everyone recognizes you and want to say hi, which can be, I'm sure, cool for a little while, and then you're like, oh my God, what's happening to my life?
Yeah,
So
I am so glad that did not happen to me, because
yeah,
that would absolutely, and I try to be friendly and nice. Like, I want everybody to have a
sure.
good experience with me, and I care too much. That would just eat me alive if every day somebody was like, "You didn't sign my son's autograph outside Winn-Dixie," and I would just be like, "Oh no,
That's right. Hate you now. Yeah.
yeah, now I gotta go to rehab."
Yeah, yeah, that's a tough dynamic, but yeah, finding that sweet spot, I guess, in between can give you a lot more longevity in your life, in terms of, I guess, your ability to handle everything going on, being in that scene in the first place, which obviously is pretty stressful. So
Yeah, and I think if you develop a fan base and who those people are, and they're going to stick with you. And I mean, if you have an open dialogue with them, then if you do misstep, they're just going to be like, "Hey, we don't like this," and then you can
yeah,
decide, like, do I want to course correct, or do I really feel like this is the way to go?
yeah, no, that makes sense. So then what's the best way then for people to keep track of all your new things that you're going to be doing in the future, and the documentary that you made? What's the best way for people to stay in touch with what you're doing?
I have a website.
Yep, that's right. You're on the internet. That's good.
It,
Yeah.
it honestly feels old school to like say your
Yeah.
website, because
Yeah.
everybody's like, follow me on Instagram, and I'm on all the social medias. I
Yeah.
even I started trying my hand at little silly TikTok videos.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah,
Really
man.
reaching out to the younger generations there.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to, be like do all the trends and stuff. I'm just trying to
TikTok
figure out.
star.
Yeah, man. Just trying to figure out ways to be silly and
Yeah.
give people a break. But yeah, steveeverett.net. Or if you don't want to type in .net because that doesn't seem legitimate enough, you can go to
Yeah.
steveeverettmusic.com.
There you go. Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on and really enjoy your music. So it's cool to see what you're doing and keeping track of all your future endeavors. So
Thank you, Ben. It was my pleasure. I really liked having the opportunity.